Roger, roll, Discovery.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0, liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast. At the end of the episode, we're going to bring you a brand new recommendation, and we'll talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we are talking about my recommendation for Dope Labs. Dope Labs is a show where it's two scientists, and they're also best friends, and you can really tell they've got this great chemistry. And they talk about a myriad of topics, like literally all across the board. They talk about some pop culture stuff, but a lot of it has to do with science. And I really like their approach for everything. And I love their tagline. Their tagline is "Science is for everybody."
Yeah, I mean,
science is for everybody.
It's very approachable, the way that they discuss topics. We'll get more into that. But yeah, the episode you recommended is called "There's Something in the Water." And in general, both of the hosts have a little blurb that we'd like to read to you. Titi is the executive producer and host. And she says, "I am a materials scientist and engineer. I love hip hop, dark lipstick, big hair, and winged eyeliner. I am the people scientist, and I believe the only dumb questions are the ones not asked." And the other host is Zakiya, executive producer and host. And she says, "I'm a molecular biologist and a lifetime learner. I talk too much and usually laugh too loud. I believe science actually is for everybody, and I'll prove it to you one episode at a time."
I just love their whole concept of trying to make science feel approachable. And they really do. Like, they're talking about some fairly heavy stuff in this episode, but it doesn't feel heavy in the way that they bring it up.
Yeah, and they have a doctor who is an expert in this and breaks
Dr.
down
Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson.
And she breaks down complicated topics, but all of this is really based around the lens of making it accessible, making it something that people can understand and see real practical implications.
I don't remember which one of these ladies said it, but they said something that I wrote down, and I want to make a t-shirt out of it, and I want to write it on my mirror. I just want to remember it and always live my life by this. She said, "When you know better, you do better." And it's talking about, like, now that as we learn about what impact we might have on the environment, it gives us an opportunity to make the choice to do better. You can't make that choice if you don't know what impact you're having. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I really liked that concept. And this whole, I think I mentioned that when I recommended the show, is that I really liked the approach that they took, which was not, "Oh, look at these horrible things we've done to the environment, blah, 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 blah." It was just, "Hey guys, we've learned some things and we can do better, right? Let's just try to do better." And I think that's a very healthy approach. I think there's just like in everything else, I feel like there's extremes. There's extremes that are like, "Oh, it's too late. We've burnt the world. Now I'm going to go live in a shack in the woods with no electricity because that's the only way that I can impact the world in a good way." And there's other people like, "Hey, cow farts are way worse than man's automobiles." And there's got to be a balance, like, we are having an impact on the environment. Obviously, it's not really a matter of debate to a certain extent.
It doesn't have to be, but it is. But yeah, no, it really is something where it's very easy for this to become very negative, very like defeatist, essentially. But in the end, we're learning a lot. We're learning how we can positively impact the planet as well. And so I think that type of education and the types of things they talk about in the show really do kind of help you reframe that into something where, oh, it's already done. We're screwed. There's nothing to do. Like, it's much better if we can approach this with something of like, there is things we can do. We know what these things are now. Let's get to work on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they kind of kicked off the show talking about, because this was post-COVID when they recorded this. Mm-hmm. It was probably more in the heat of COVID than where we are now, hopefully, fingers crossed. But they were talking about the positive effects that quarantine has had on COVID, or not on COVID, on the environment. And I thought that was really interesting when a lot of stuff like that was coming out. I remember one of the things that I read, I think it was a picture, and it was like dolphins in Venice or something like that. And that hadn't been seen in like, I forget how long. It was ridiculously long. And then I think there was a thing that we talked about with sea turtles coming to an area in India to lay eggs for the first time in forever.
Yeah, well, a lot of species we thought were extinct were rediscovered because of quarantine. And really, it does at least show the impact that humanity and everything we have
exactly
impacts nature. We can at least see that, because as soon as we stopped going out, we stopped having boats, we stopped having people travel, there was definite visible effects from nature responding to that.
Which is fascinating. And I think it is one of those things that kind of is a testament to our effect on our environment around us, whether it be small or large. But we are definitely, all of our inputs and our choices do affect the environment around us. And there's even some negative effects, because she mentioned finding masks everywhere. And that is one of the things that I'm like,
I had not thought about that, but
I see masks on the ground all the time. And it's just one of those, it's weird. I don't know why. There's a few things that trigger me, and masks as litter trigger me. I don't know why. It just does. Also,
in general, just throwing trash around kind of bothers me, because just put it somewhere else. Honestly, just put it in your car until you buy a trash can. I don't understand. I never did, because we live out in the country. And so I would say in country areas, stop signs and things of that nature become targets for throwing trash at. And so it like kind of congregates around things because they just see it and they can throw it at it. And it's always bothered me, because it's like, there's trash cans everywhere. Like if you're looking for a trash can, pretty much anywhere you can find it.
Yeah. But, I just thought that was an interesting dichotomy of like the positive and negative effects that this pandemic has had on the environment. But then they started talking about the effects of global warming and stuff like that in the ocean, which is not something that a lot of people have talked about. They talk a lot about pollution in the ocean, but I don't think when we bring up global warming that the ocean is something that's really discussed very much.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like we grew up in the time where global warming was the word for it. That's what I'm saying. All of this is constantly evolving and becoming more sophisticated, because now it's pretty much called climate change. Because global warming, people would essentially say, well, warming patterns are cyclical and we didn't have any impact on that and all of this stuff. But now when you get to climate change, it's more far reaching. It can be ocean temperatures. It can be like severe weather issues. There's a lot of things that can encompass. And so that's kind of been the full switch to just climate change.
Yeah. And they talk with Dr. Elizabeth Johnson about a few different things. But one of the things they mentioned that I never even heard about, never learned in school, was kind of like the term, I think it was gyres. Is that the right word? It was like, it was like the circulating ocean currents that basically dictate all of the tides around the whole world, and the way that the ocean circulates everywhere around the whole globe. And I thought that was really fascinating to learn about. And then they talked about the effects of the ocean on the rest of the environment, not just, the water. But I mean, heck, right now we're recording this, this is kind of dating when we record it, but we're recording this right before a hurricane. I mean, we may lose some of the audio if we lose power, because there's a hurricane right now.
Outside.
And that's one of the effects that global warming or climate change has had on the environment, which is it's warmed up the ocean as a whole. And because of that, it has affected the weather. and made more hurricanes or tsunamis. And not only that, but made some of the strongest ones that we've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, and it really is kind of awe-inspiring to think about the oceans as like one entity, as how much impact they have on the planet. Because we even, like, through work and through some stuff we did, we kind of learned about how algae being in the ocean is the reason that we have like breathable atmosphere.
It's
literally
it's insane.
that one thing enabled like life on the planet to be how it is. And so just that one thing, the ocean being alive with algae, brought everything else. And so it has such a huge impact that it's so crazy to kind of dig more into this.
And there's such a fine equilibrium too, because when you talk about algae, and we here in Florida, we deal with, red tide, which is actually an algae bloom, where now the algae is out of equilibrium and there's too much, to the point where there's not enough oxygen in the water for the fish to survive. So then you get these giant fish kills, and it's gross. You go to the beach and there's just dead fish everywhere. It stinks.
It's lethal to dogs.
It burns your eyes. I've been to the beach during an algae bloom like that. And it literally burns your eyes, makes you cough. And you're like, what the heck? Like my throat itches.
It's been causing asthma in like adults, and it will literally kill your dog.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that one.
So, and that's another one where it's like, I wonder how this happened. We don't have to get into all of it. There was a spill in our area that was seen for, I think literally for like 40 years. And just, it's a big company that didn't care. It spilled into our bay. And if you look at the map of where the red tide is happening, strangely, it is exactly where that spill was dumped into the bay. So it's one of those things where we have to kind of comprehend how we're affecting nature, because we threw the balance off there, and it's Florida's a tourism state, and it's one of the things I feel like everybody can kind of get behind mentally, at least. We'll see if anybody really tries to address the problems here, but everybody gets that people want to go to the beach and they don't want there to be dead fish everywhere, and that is preventable. We can prevent that. It's just, and so it's just, I feel like by learning this stuff, you see where the issues are, and then that's when the change can happen, and that was something I really liked about this show, where they make it so that's very accessible. You don't have to be a doctor to listen to this show, because you hear, okay, you have an engineer, you have a molecular biologist, and a doctor telling you about the ocean. It is not dry. Do not get the wrong impression about the show at all. It is very funny. It's really fun to listen to. And their stated goal for this show is to make it accessible. And they do the whole time. And so you're learning about these things, but not in a way where you feel like you're at college, just hearing a lecture. It's nothing like that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very approachable. And they did talk about some of the misconceptions with conservation. And one of the ones that I didn't actually think about, and I don't know, it was weird to be introspective about this kind of stuff and what we've seen in culture, is the racial misconceptions about conservation.
This one was really interesting to me, because I had never even thought about that.
Never even thought about it. And once they started describing it, is like, wow, everything in the media is like some lumberjack white dude that wants to.
True. Yes. No, and I definitely think that's a problem, especially when they have just full evidence saying that this is a disparity that is not at all accurate, aside from it being just stupid. Aside from it being like whitewashed, it also isn't accurate. That's not the main drivers of environmental activism or any of these things. And so it's like, well, that's something I didn't know. And it was just one of those things like, okay, of course it's that stupid. And the entire groups of people who are doing great work that are being ignored by the media. So it is just crazy to think about.
But yeah, they talk about a few different, misconceptions about conservation and things that we can do. And that was one of the things that they talked about that I had never really thought about. And when they talked about it, I was like, man, that's true. I don't know. It's just,
I
It's
really
just
like
something
their
that's kind of
description
been,
of like who it is. It's like some like college guy wearing Patagonia, everything. It's like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Now, there's something else that I will not lie. I went down a rabbit hole because I was like, what? I've heard so much about this because it's one of those things that has somehow been politicized, even though it's kind of a bipartisan thing. And that is the Green New Deal and the misconception. And honestly, this is what I believed for sure because it was something to do with government. So I figured it was like a giant stack of paperwork that was 1 million pages long and not readable because it was all in legalese. But the Green New Deal is 14 pages long.
Oh yeah,
and in regular font.
Yeah, you can definitely go read it. It's not like that.
I did go read it.
It's not like it's not like the tax bills that they don't even read.
Exactly.
Here's an 800-page tax bill that no one has read. Let's go ahead and sign this.
But I actually wanted to read some of it because I think that it's worth reading. There's some of it that's
great.
Okay. I think that we can all agree on almost all of this.
No, the problem is where they're getting the money. That's why it's a political thing, is where they're getting the money for the Green New Deal is the contentious part. Is I'll say it that way.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. The main thing that I wanted to read was this, just kind of like I paraphrase it a little bit, but it's basically what it is as a whole. It's kind of like the mission statement of everything. It says the House of Representatives recognizes that a new national, social, industrial, and economic mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II and the New Deal era is a historic opportunity. And here's the things that they start listing that they want to be able to try to implement. And I don't think there's a thing in here that we shouldn't all be on the same page on. It said to create millions of good, high-wage jobs in the United States, to provide unprecedented levels of prosperity and economic security for all people of the United States, and to counteract systemic injustices. It is the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers, to create millions of good, high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity and economic security for all people of the U.S., to invest in the infrastructure and industry of the United States to sustainably meet the challenges of the 21st century, to secure for all people of the United States for generations to come. Here are the things that I think everyone should agree on: clean air and water, climate and community resiliency, healthy food, access to nature and a sustainable environment, and to promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of indigenous people, communities of color, migrant communities, de-industrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and the youth. I don't see anything in there that we can't all just say, hey, that sounds like a much better world that we're living in right now.
No, it's you don't think you have to say that everyone deserves to have clean drinking water, but then there's a place called Flint, Michigan, right now, literally right now. This is something where like underrepresented communities are dealing with this right now. And so it does seem like just a weird thing to have to include in something like this. But at some point it's like, yeah, they deserve to have clean water. And it just deserves to happen. But yeah, no, I think in general, the conversations, and that's very generous. The conversations about the Green New Deal, they tend to go awry with like how the money is being spent. And I mean, you also have, I feel like this is just fact based. You have corporate lobbyists from gas corporations and people who would essentially be phased out due to this type of language, and they don't want it. And so it's like, okay, well, this is something that I feel like people.
No, I mean, we've seen it recently with, we've got an influx of companies, big car companies that are moving towards electric. And also we're seeing this giant hike in gas prices. And I've seen so many people been so mad about gas prices and stuff. Like, okay, gas prices suck right now. I agree. It's not the best. But did we not figure that gas prices would probably increase before we get away from sucking on the teat of the gas monster.
Yeah, no, and I mean, really, there's so many reasons why that moves, and the easiest way to kind of have that conversation is ask them why they think the gas prices are changing, and you can really gauge if they actually have a reason why. Because I get that, yeah, it's expensive to fill up your car right now, but it's funny because you can kind of see how deep into this they are, or if they're just mad because the price is high. Because I get that.
Yeah. But I mean, and we didn't want to jump off into like politics or anything like that. What we want to do and what our objective is, and I think it's what their objective is too, is just kind of be like, hey, let's all come together because we can all agree that we can do better and that we should do better. And let's come together and do that. Let's do better. Let's come together and do better together so that our future, because that is what we're talking about. We're not talking about probably in me and Zach's lifetime that everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, but our great grandchildren are still going to have to live on this planet. And we want to be able to give them something that's worth giving them. Yeah. And we have to make those choices now.
No, I mean, we're seeing crazy stuff happening all the time. You know, a buddy of mine moved to Seattle and he was at over 100-degree temperatures in Seattle a couple weeks ago. We're seeing drastic changes in how the climate is reacting. And I think it's fine to at least have a conversation about it. I don't understand why that would even be a hot take. So it's great that shows like this are making this where you can see the pathways, you can see the problems, you can see the things that are going to need to be addressed. And it really, because I'm trying to think if there was anything like, okay, I'm trying to put myself in the place of somebody in high school. We were in high school at one point and we had zero access to any kind of information like this. Like nothing like this. I'm trying to think, the one I do remember, and it still stuck with me, to be fair. Every time I had a 6-pack of Cokes, I would destroy those little plastic thingies on top because I didn't want to murder a turtle. That's as far as our kind of education, as far as, and I mean, polluting was always like Captain Planet was around. They're like, don't put weird stuff in the water and don't throw your trash all over the place. But that was kind of it. And we've just seen this huge increase in information and knowledge because of the amount of just sensors, you know, the amount of satellites. You have NOAA, you have NASA, you have so many of these organizations just grabbing information. And so we've learned a ton about what is happening with the planet in the past. You could even call it 10 years. Our knowledge and our understanding has increased so much. So it's just so crazy that kids that are in high school right now have the kind of access to this type of information that they're going to be, I think, fully supportive of trying to solve these things.
No, I agree. I 100% agree. I also want to really brag on this show's production because I went to their website because I always try to do a little bit of research, a little bit of homework on what the show's about, what's kind of the background, a little bit more about the hosts and stuff like that. And this is maybe the first show that I've seen that has full transcription. So like I was reading along while listening to the show, which made it much more easy for me to like retain the stuff they were saying. But not only that, but they have each one of, they call them labs. So this was lab 28. There's something in the water. And in this, they have this whole extra thing. It's almost like a blog that goes along with it that has a million links. It has literally like YouTube videos about, you know, from National Geographic. They've got links to the what is it? The things that were mentioned in the Billion Oyster Project. They've got everything about, you know, Dr. Elizabeth Johnson and all of her things that she's done. They've got this whole section that says homework. And then it says, it's basically Dr. Johnson shared some great links that we came across, a couple others that you might enjoy. And there's all these links and books that you can read. And there's so much work that you can tell on the back end that went into these episodes. And as content creators ourselves, it's really good to see these kind of things. And we appreciate it a lot because it makes our job easier.
Yeah, no, I'll throw this out there just in general. It's worth checking out your favorite podcast's website because there are a lot of podcasts that do stuff like that. that really have a lot of back end things that really add to your appreciation of the episode that you just listen to. So yeah, it sounds great too. You know, everything about the production of the show is great. Really awesome show. Go check it out. Go take a look at the names of their labs. And I'm sure you will find one on there that immediately piques your interest, and check it out. I think you're going to have a great time.
They've even got one just on Cardi B. So I think that if you don't
have one
like
on Cardi
science,
B, why did you not do that one? Who cares about the planet? I need to learn more about Cardi B.
I think that we all know enough about Cardi B.
You say that, but you don't know what you don't know.
It's true. It's true. Wait, what was the quote again? You know more, you do better. No. When you know better, you do better.
See? And that applies to Cardi B too.
I need to know more about Cardi B.
No, but seriously, amazing show. That was a great recommendation. So I am taking it in a different direction. I have a show called Mysterious Universe. And each week, hosts Aaron Wright and Benjamin Grundy investigate some of the interesting, mysterious things that happen all over the world. They have a lot of episodes about like cryptozoology, UFOs. It reminds me a lot of Astonishing Legends, which we've covered before, where they'll get into a lot of these things that they're exploring and trying to research things that are kind of on the edges of folklore and things like that. But the one I wanted to talk about, because it's so interesting, we talked about this on a Discovery Weekly at one point, but this is a deep dive about the whole thing. It's called 25.24 is like the first thing, and then it's called Fenn Hunters. And this is the guy, he was a poet, and he got diagnosed with cancer, and he devised this plan to go out epically. So he wrote a poem that was a treasure map, and he hid a treasure in somewhere north of Santa Fe is all he told everyone. But he gave them clues, and it started an entire kind of like cultural thing of people just wanting to find that $1 million treasure chest in the mountains, because he literally gave you like it's cryptic. Sure. But he gave you a clue. He gave you a riddle to solve, and at the end is a treasure. And I won't know more spoilies. That's what the episode's about. There's a lot of cool things that'll be fun to talk about. It's a really interesting thing. And yeah, so next week we'll talk about Mysterious Universe, Fenn Hunters. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.